Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final Meridian West webinar before the summer break. Today, we're going to be tackling, really fascinating topic, looking at what we've identified as the client experience satisfaction deficit in professional services, talking a little bit about what we mean by that, what the evidence for that is, and then really delighted to say that I'm going to be joined by my colleagues, Jon Mulligan and Ellie Berry, both colleagues here at Meridian West, to talk a little bit about their views and experiences on this really fascinating topic as well. We're going to go for about 30 minutes, but leave some time at the end for questions. So if anybody has any thoughts, reflections, or questions for us, do type them into the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye out for those and leave a bit of time at the end to cover that. So, as I said, really fascinating topic today, looking at the satisfaction deficit, and I thought it would be worthwhile just starting with a quick view on what we mean by this. So essentially, what we've seen from our research amongst buyers of professional services over the last 2 to 3 years in particular is a growing satisfaction deficit. And by that, we mean a widening gap between what they're telling us they want and expect from the professional advisors that they work with. So whether that be accountants, business consultants, property advisors, lawyers, and others, and the reality of their service experience and their broader client experience with the firm. And that gap has been widening over the last couple of years. And it's become very noticeable in our most recent Business Buyers Barometer research, which is our syndicated research amongst 1,000 buyers of professional services in the UK, completed this June. So let's think about what the evidence for that assertion is. It's quite a bold assertion that I'm making here, that we're seeing a satisfaction deficit. So what's the real evidence for that? Well, as I mentioned, our Business Buyers Barometer research paints that picture really clearly. This year in particular, the 2023 results, hot off the press. When we look at the accountancy sector, for example, what we've seen is that 8 of the top 10 firms have seen their satisfaction scores decrease over the last 3 years, some more so than others, but it's a marked industry-wide trend, and we're seeing similar patterns in other sectors as well. In particular, the scores around added value, value for money, proactive insight sharing, and communication have seen the biggest drops over the last couple of years, and again, that's very clear from our research. And it also reflects more broadly the work that we do, speaking to buyers of professional services, running listening programs for a range of professional firms. These trends keep coming up in conversations that we're having about client experience. So I think there's a couple of things at the heart of this problem, and we'll kind of get Ellie and Jon's view on this as well. But certainly from what I think I've been seeing over the last few years is that we saw a bit of a satisfaction boost actually back in mid-2020, largely as a result of COVID. And I think actually what COVID did is it brought about some really great value enhancing behaviours from professional advisors, more frequent communication with clients, guiding them through what was for everybody a really tricky time, investing more time in actually liaising, communicating with clients, albeit virtually through a screen, sharing information, sharing views about what they were seeing and anticipating in the market. And I think as a result of that, we saw that satisfaction scores were for many firms at their highest back in 2020. In the 2 to 3 years since then, as I talked before, we've seen that steady decline. And I think there's a whole host of reasons for that. But I think some of the key ones being that firms are at their maximum capacity. I hear a lot from buyers talking about the challenge they have just about getting in contact with the right people. Fee earners very busy, head down on delivery mode, but not necessarily spending enough time on those client care and client experience behaviours. And some of those great things that we saw off the back of the pandemic, the sharing of information, the regular communication and contact, we've kind of reverted away from that. In actual fact, there's now a kind of, I think, more of a thirst for in-person engagement. and essentially a kind of neglecting of many of the service fundamentals that people see as really essential to delivering a great experience. And a lot of that has tailed off in the last couple of years, hence those declining scores that we talked about. So that's my kind of case for why I think we're seeing this satisfaction deficit. But I'd be really interested, Jon Mulligan, to tell us a little bit from your experience. Does that reflect what you're picking up?
I think so, very much. So I do quite a lot of interviews with clients, in-depth interviews as part of client listening programs. Also run quite a few online surveys of kind of quant surveys for different client listening programs. And some of the things that I'm starting to see creep in to these, the feedback is a kind of a sense that clients are losing a little bit of patience with there's a little bit less tolerance for mistakes, for errors, frustrations articulated around what should really be fundamental processes not working, things like billing, poor onboarding processes, which we know from some of our other research are really highly correlated with the highest scoring clients on feedback programs. So I think that has been noticeable over the last year. Those things are being talked about more, along with, as you said, a desire to get out. I regularly hear people say, love to have more in-person events, training, sharing of best practice. Clients really want to kind of benefit from firms' wider experience.
It's an interesting one, that, because I think we hear a lot of that from clients, but I also hear from a lot of firms that, you know, they're putting on events and actually attendance is sometimes a bit sporadic, you know, a bit unpredictable. What's your sense on how that balance is kind of playing out from what you're hearing from buyers? What do they mean when they say they want more face time?
I think they want to. I think it's about relevance. I think that's the biggest thing I hear. It's not just an event for the sake of having an event. It's not like they want to get out and about and be schmoozed, or, you know, that kind of old-fashioned sense of a business development event. But they want to go out and attend, get real value from an event, but in person, get out to meet their peers in other sectors, in other organisations, but also at the same time have real learning and development opportunity. So there's a real kind of interaction between events and training and development and sharing of best practice, I think.
And I see you've been nodding along, Ellie, to that. What kind of what resonates with what Jon said with you?
Yeah, I think, the point around relevance is definitely key, and I think from that, I think there's also a desire for more of that informal sort of networking, and I think that people became quite used to during COVID, the sort of informal catch-ups over Teams, over Zoom. I think just more of that is definitely sort of not just those big events, but that informal sort of networking. And also, I think not just events and networking, but actually sort of, I think there's a call for more in-person meetings during the project and during sort of the whole client relationship. I think the kickoff, and especially towards the ends, the deliverables, I think they're being identified as really valuable sort of touch points of when we can organise those sort of in-person meetings.
Because onboarding was something you picked up before, Jon. What are you hearing around that in particular?
It's one of those things that people don't talk about. It's not priority unless things go wrong. And we find in quite a number of those different studies that we've done, highly correlated scores. And for people who've kind of onboarded with a firm in the last sort of 12 months before the survey, in the previous 12 months, we kind of see those people's experiences of that really closely tied to their scores of the relationship of the service overall. So if you have a good onboarding experience, it really starts a relationship on the right foot. Conversely, if it's poor, if things aren't done, if people aren't feeling like they're being given what they were promised during the pitch sales process, I think that really can have a detriment, and it takes quite a long time to recover from that.
What are some of the other pain points you're hearing, Ellie, from firms and their clients about service at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the main ones I think we're seeing is definitely as a result, I think, of organizations doing this really well during COVID is just sort of client service fundamentals and client service basics. It's communication, responsiveness. I think that, you know, we were put in a situation where that was quite novel, and people were really sort of outperforming themselves there. But I think now that we've gone back to this sort of hybrid way of working, not that we're reverting back to what was used to, but I think that's not so much at the forefront of people's minds, but the expectation of clients still hasn't changed. So the expectation is still there. So yeah, I think that that's definitely one. And then I think another one, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more depth, is the sort of value add piece. I think, you know, I think that was also starting to organizations started to do that really well during COVID, sort of sharing relevant insights. But again, I think that we've sort of organization going back to sort of resting on their laurels there, whether that's, you know, as you've identified, sort of busyness, time, resources, but it's definitely an area that I think is coming across lots of different sectors and across lots of our different clients' feedback.
And why don't we try and unpack that a little bit, this idea of value add, because I completely agree, it's, you know, it's a big topic and it can mean lots of different things to different clients, different contexts. So, you know, what are you hearing around that at the moment, Ellie?
I think there's lots of different elements of it. I think, you know, I think if you look at it quite simplistically, we could talk about it as sort of sharing relevant insights, and, you know, that's really important. As I said, these sort of short pulses, bits of information that really is showing your clients that they're thinking of you, you're thinking of them, and that you understand their business and their objectives. And then I think there's definitely a piece around sort of value add in the sense of a partnership, sort of relationship, not just the simple sort of assessment, first view process of steps of a project, but the bit that comes after that. And I think that, you know, during this time, the uncertainty, I think people are definitely sort of having this desire for more of a partnership, more support. So I think there's an element of that to it as well.
What's your view on that, Jon?
Then in danger of blowing my own trumpet as we're doing a webinar at the moment, but this kind of what I hear quite a lot of interviews is this kind of sharing of best practice, of sharing of wider. It's kind of the sense of knowledge sharing and being having this kind of constant conversation with your clients, being proactive. Have you seen this bit of this new development within your industry? Always making sure that it's relevant and personal and tailored to that individual client. People don't want kind of catch-all email newsletters or brief, you know, email briefings. They do want relevant content though.
And I mean, what do you think? Because I mean, I certainly agree with everything both of you have said there, but to some extent, these are things that we've been hearing for a while. So why do you think firms are not able to meet that expectation of that value add that clients tell us they're looking for? Any thoughts on that, Jon?
I think Ellie touched a little bit on it before. Busyness. It's an interesting topic, business. We've had a few clients come to us about trying to understand that topic recently, and I think I think potentially ties into a number of the issues with the deficit, satisfaction deficit. We saw an explosion of work during the COVID. We all had to change how we worked, but also we also got a lot more work as well, bizarrely. And firms, it seems, have never been busier. But not necessarily, but that investment in the front-facing technology, things like Teams and so on, has happened. But has that always happened with back-office processes? Do people have the tools to do this content management, content marketing, this knowledge sharing easily, or is it all? Are people still relying on quite manual processes? I don't quite know the answer to that, but I do hear quite a lot about people about just. We'd love to do that, but we're just so busy.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's interesting that I think on this whole value add dynamic, there's a bit of an elephant in the room. If we look at the last kind of 2 to 3 years, you know, actually many professional firms have performed really well financially over the last couple of years. You know, they've never, as we've been talking about, never been busier. record profits for many. Obviously, we're in a kind of broader macroeconomic context over the last year or so with, very high inflation. Many firms have been putting up prices in response to that. And I think that does create that expectation amongst clients that actually, they're needing to look again at the value they're getting from professional advisors, particularly as we're now operating in a climate of, relatively static growth, having to look at internal budgets. Many, again, from the research that we've done, are saying they are allocating more spend, but it's in many cases kind of below inflationary spend. So a kind of real terms cut often in terms of spending on external advice. I think continuation around consolidation, particularly those operating kind of panels, looking to, reduce the number of firms they work with in order to get greater value. So, I absolutely think that comes into the conversation as well. I think you look at the kind of added value bit of it, but you also have to look at the pure kind of fees being paid and how much of that can be tolerated over the next couple of years in possibly more difficult market context. I don't know whether either of you have kind of picked that up from conversations you've had.
Not yet from my side, but having in previous hats, I worked on a consumer side, and during post-financial crash in the late noughties, we very much saw this kind of similar kind of trend emerging, a bit of a lagging. Satisfaction is always a bit of a lagging measure, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if those things start being cropped up in conversations. And there's an interesting question from Sally around how do you cut through the noise, because obviously everybody's wanting to do this and differentiate. And it's a very difficult challenge. Differentiating, I think it's about making sure it's linked to brand identity and always making sure it's relevant to individual clients and personal. Tricky ask, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy.
I think it's a really interesting point, and I'm just coming to Sally's question about, I think there's kind of two parts to that. Are these trends within real estate? And I would say, absolutely. I think these are kind of B2B, broad trends we're seeing across different markets. They do obviously manifest slightly differently in different advisory contexts, but I don't think real estate is kind of immune from this at all. And to that point about kind of cutting through and how do you actually achieve the resonance, I think a lot of what we've been talking about essentially comes down to is the sum of the individual interactions that people are having with different members of your team. Yes, you need the kind of the back office and the systems to kind of support that, but a lot of this comes down to interaction with individuals, and therefore it's about human behavior, it's about personalities, it's about people's time, hence the conversation about kind of busyness, and I think making these as easy for people as possible. And that's why I think a lot of the time, one of the things that we like to try and do is work with firms to really distill down on what are those small handful of small things that make the biggest difference, those kind of little behaviors, that really, delight clients, that really set you apart from competitors. It's not necessarily about, getting a 10 out of 10 on absolutely everything, but it's, what are those really, really key things that make an absolute difference. And Ellie, I don't know your kind of reflections on this as well.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think it's, obviously I said earlier that I think it's quite noticeable that, getting the basics right is definitely something that's coming up. But, that's not just enough to sort of differentiate yourself. So I think, to add value, to really build on those emotional bonds, I think, like you've both been saying, then that's a responsibility for sort of the employees as well as the organisation, and sort of leadership. And I think what's interesting at the moment is we're starting to see some sort of creative ways and interesting ways that our clients are actually looking into this. And I think, there's definitely sort of an emerging piece around this internal reflection. So sort of marrying up this client research with sort of employee research, which I think before was always quite siloed. But I think, we've seen a client do it recently, where they've really gone into look to, sort of how their employees define great client service, exceptional client service, and sort of marrying the two, which really sort of leads to correlations, and I think identifies some really interesting points. And I can definitely see that sort of internal reflection definitely increasing.
It's one of the benefits and strengths of client listening, isn't it? That programs in general is that you get a lot of feedback that you can then put in place internal training and development processes. One of the challenges for us all, I think, and it cuts across lots of different technical sectors. We work with actuarial firms, law firms, accountancy firms. Is that real challenge of creating a modern professional that's not just a technical expert, but is also a great communicator, is able to foster relationships, and it's a real challenge.
And I mean, on that piece, Jon, I know this is an area where you've done, quite a lot of work, thinking about the kind of future professional. And I guess how kind of ready do you think firms are to kind of embrace the change that their clients are kind of demanding? Because again, this is a kind of a topic that's been kind of evolutionary for a while. This is not not new, but I think we're in a kind of an interesting place now in 2023. I mean, do you think this is sufficiently top of the agenda?
I think for some firms, obviously, I think we can all do more. We heard some great examples recently from a couple of clients in another kind of roundtable where people had really started to think about this right from the beginning of an employee's career career with the firm. So all of these commerciality, for want of a better phrase to sum this up, thinking is really built into onboarding processes for new staff. So when they join the firm, their inductions are led through what it means to be an advisor. It's not just about writing a perfect legal brief, but it's also about being able to interpret that and match up to a client's agenda. We also, a number of different bodies are thinking about this, working with IBA, some of the actuarial bodies, around thinking about the global sense of the profession and what can they do to support the development of new professionals and also attract new people into each profession. Yeah,
it is really interesting because I think, particularly at that, new entrant, those kind of, juniors coming into the profession now, we know in the UK, for example, there's been some significant changes around, training and qualification. I'm thinking of kind of, training for new solicitors, for example, is, I think, aimed at, broadening that skill set. But it feels like actually that, again, to use the word kind of evolution, it's something that, has to be continually developed throughout people's careers. And I think, this is where I think, marketing and business development actually can and should be playing a kind of critical role in taking and understanding, these key behaviors. Are they being delivered? Are, clients on the receiving end of this? And if not, where's the opportunity, as you were saying before, Ellie, to actually, work with L&D, to kind of understand what are the frustration points and the pain points amongst employees, what's preventing them from delivering on maybe what the firm's brand promise is, for example. Go on, Ellie.
I was just going to say, yeah, and it's as simple as what I said before, like just sort of defining what good client service looks like. And I think, there's lots of conversation around L&D, external help with that. But I think actually, at a simplistic base level is sort of going back to those basics. And I think being able to, the practical application of that, rather than, sending people off on sort of learning development courses, is really like, how are we applying this to our client journey? And I think we're also seeing more sort of research around that sort of client journey mapping, and again, sort of mapping that to internal employees sort of experience as well.
That's really interesting, I think, because it's, I think it's about, understanding the context of these behaviors, in context, not in abstract. What does being a great advisor mean in the context of doing, a kind of bet the farm M&A? What does it mean in the context of doing, a high stakes litigation? These kind of different contexts, there will be different things that, are important there.
There are
Jon,
some
do you want to
fundamentals, though, aren't there? And that we hear often: consistency, communication,
Yep.
good project management basics, following up. And it's a lot of it. It sounds it's actually quite basic, isn't it? It's doing minutes, sending agendas, all of those kind of stuff.
Yeah. In fact, why don't we have just a quick look at that? Because one of the things that we've done, is we've, I guess, kind of looked across all of the research that we've been doing, interviews that we've done with clients and buyers, talking about their service experience, and essentially trying to kind of really understand what makes the difference. And I think, Ellie, you were talking before about those foundational habits, and I think these are things that, absolutely, if you're not getting these right and you're not doing them consistently, then these are the kind of warning signs where clients start going, well, actually, look, this relationship isn't quite kind of working out for us. So, these are all the things I think, Jon, that you were talking about there. It is about those, the communication. It's about responsiveness. It's about having the right team, the right people doing the right tasks. It's about that value for money piece. It's about being kind of responsive and understanding the broader kind of commercial context. Absolutely. And I think these are the things that actually are the minimum expectation now. If you're not doing this consistently, then that is going to be the warning flag for many clients to kind of reconsider, are they working with the right kind of providers? And these are things that I think are absolutely at the heart of a lot of the things that we kind of measure when we talk to people about service. But then we come to the kind of more value or relationship enhancing behaviors, and I think there's kind of three broad buckets here that we see a lot, and we've talked about this today. But I think that relationship management piece is absolutely fundamental. It's about how do we kind of work together, collaborate for kind of mutual benefit. This is away from just a kind of client supplier type relationship. This is a kind of genuine partnership working together. I think increasingly we're seeing and hearing about the importance of alignment between clients and the firms they work with on values. We've obviously seen that in the kind of news over the last kind of week or so, in relation to Coots, about, the importance of kind of values and having shared values with your clients. But I think, increasingly it's about saying, well, look, are we aligned? Where are we working together on projects, and what are the opportunities to kind of develop that beyond just discrete matters? And I think the third thing, which for me is kind of really fundamental, again, this comes off the back of, I think why satisfaction was so high coming off the immediate COVID period, was actually this kind of advisory mindset. It's this kind of anticipating, what your clients want almost before they know themselves. It's, bringing that knowledge and intelligence about what's happening in the wider market, what's happening in their peer group, being able to share that, and to do that in the context of not always just waiting to be asked the question, but doing that kind of proactively. So, these are some of the kind of critical behaviors that that we're seeing. And I appreciate we're coming up to time, so I don't know if anybody else in the live audience has questions. Do feel free to type them in. But I wonder, just as a kind of last reflection from you both, Jon, Ellie, what's your sense? We've obviously seen in the last couple of years, this satisfaction deficit, as we're calling, this widening of the gap between expectation and reality. Are you kind of confident that firms can address this? Are you kind of optimistic about the future? Some final words, Jon?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think there's increasingly firms are realizing the benefits of things like client listening programs, and as Ellie said, this kind of joining that up with employee research and really trying to understand what it is that clients need and want. So yeah, I'm absolutely positive about the future.
Yes. And Ellie, do you share that optimism?
Yeah, I would definitely echo you there. I think, as I said previously, I think we're already seeing some really sort of creative ways that our clients are looking at how they can improve this, and I think that's only going to increase. So I think definitely from what we're seeing, clients are ready and also keen and interested to find out different ways that they can do that.
We're seeing more senior leadership buy-in as well from our clients, and I think which is always imperative to make client listening a success. It's becoming more embedded within organisations, becoming more business as usual.
Yeah, I absolutely would concur with all of that. And I think just a last thought from me, I think in the going back a few years, kind of pre-pandemic, what we were very much seeing from our research was a kind of leveling of the playing field in terms of satisfaction. Many firms were, kind of addressing this, but there was a lot of kind of sameness. I think, actually what we're seeing now is that client experience battleground is actually, becoming more of an area for differentiation. Lots of firms are kind of talking a great game in this area, but the ones that are really able to deliver, and as you say, Jon, actually leadership see this as a thread that runs through everything they do. This is not just a kind of marketing initiative, a BD initiative. This is actually fundamental to the way that the firm operates and right throughout the client journey from sales through to delivery and beyond. So I'm optimistic as well. I hope the audience are. I think I just want to thank you, Jon and Ellie, for joining us today. Thank you so much for the question from the audience. And just a quick reminder that we will be taking a pause over August to enjoy what's left of the British summer, but we'll be recharged and back in September with a new series of webinars and roundtables. So do look out for those. But thank you very much, and everybody enjoy your summer break.